Good morning. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure for me to open this session on the inequality of risk and how we can promote women's leadership in recovery. This is a topic of key importance in Norwegian foreign and development policy. It is often stated that there is no such thing as a natural disaster. A natural hazard can, however, turn into a disaster depending on the vulnerability, risk preparedness, policies and general level of development of the affected country, region or community. Who lives and who dies, who loses their livelihoods and who manages to recover is more or less a social calculus. In other words, poor people are less likely to survive and recover from a disaster event. We also know that women are disproportionately affected by disasters. This is acknowledged in the Paris Agreement and in the Sendai framework. Women and girls are likely to suffer higher rates of mortality, morbidity, and economic damage to their livelihoods, in large part due to gender differences in capacity to cope with such events and insufficient access to information and early warnings. Studies show that women, boys and girls, are 14 times more likely than men to die during a disaster. And women comprise 80% of those displaced by disasters and conflicts. We also know that following a disaster, the likelihood that women will be victims of domestic and sexual violence increases. They even avoid using emergency shelters for fear of being sexually assaulted. A recent IFRC study on SGBV on disasters concluded that those responding to disasters are not aware that sexual gender-based violence may increase in disasters and are neither looking nor preparing for it. However, this morning, rather than dwelling on just these gloomy facts, I would also like to continue by focusing on women's role as agents of change. Because it is important to remember that women are not only vulnerable to disasters, conflicts and their aftermaths, but they are often have a strong body of knowledge and expertise that can be used in disaster risk reduction, climate change mitigation and adaptation strategies, as well as in recovery and peace-building efforts. In fact, as a recent CARE report argues, women are the ones on the ground, coping in the heat of the moment, responding to the crisis. They are the ones helping their families to survive and their communities to cope. Adequate capacity building measures need to be taken to empower women for preparedness as well as build their capacity for alternate livelihood means in post-disaster situations. We also know that women are central in the fight for peace. When men go to war, women become the heads of households, conservers of the community, and rebuilders of the economy. Women are also highly effective peace builders if they are given the opportunity. As Hillary Clinton once said, women are the largest untapped reservoir of talent in the world. So how do we translate this knowledge into action? First of all, it is essential that humanitarian and development actors acknowledge women's and girls' roles as agents of change, humanitarian responders, and as peace builders. Particular effort should be made to reach marginalized women and girls, engaging them as active partners and building on their needs and on their capacities. Furthermore, women should have a seat at the table in the formal systems of disaster risk management and resilience building, both when the policies are developed and when policies are implemented. Today's women's roles are often invisible and rarely acknowledged. Average female representation in national and global climate negotiations is less than 30%. Women should also be formally involved in peace processes. They're often active in civil society peace movements and play important informal roles but they are frequently left out of the formal peace negotiations. Active participation of women is crucial for resolving conflict and create lasting peace. Norway works to ensure that the gender perspective is central in peace accords and in peace processes, and last year we took the initiative to establish a global network of female peace negotiators. Sex and age disaggregated data must be collected and reported. This is challenging, but we need to know how disasters and gender equality in the society interacts. Often loss and damage assessments are gender neutral and are usually recorded in terms of productive resources, which are usually owned by men. This leads to a substantial underestimation of the impact and disaster on women. Stories about women's resilience should be brought forward. Female farmers in rural Africa are, for instance, well placed to tackle the effects of climate change on food security, partly because they are often responsible for saving, trading, and exchanging seeds, a practice that for generations have been key to breeding food crops and with desired qualities and to strengthen the diversity of crops. It is therefore essential that women get to participate in the development of climate-adapted varieties. Since women are often left out of the discussions, their contribution to building resilience is often overlooked. In a new action plan for sustainable food systems in Norwegian development foreign policy, which will be launched in June of this year, supporting women's role in securing household food and nutrition security and building resilience will be stressed, and the importance of this will be underlined. A general strengthening of women's role in society is needed. Only then can women be able to play leadership roles in response, recovery, and preparedness. For this to take place, a number of critical factors must be in place. 1. Women must be able to participate in politics on an equal footing with men. 2. Women must have equal economic rights and be able to participate in the labor market on equal terms with men. 3. Both girls and boys must have access to quality education. 4. Girls and women's sexual and reproductive health and human rights must be secured. And 5. Violence and harmful practices towards girls and women must be abolished. In Norwegian development policy, these 5 critical factors are prioritized. In addition, in all programs and measures, we consider how women's rights and gender equality can be incorporated, and whether women's rights and gender equality can be adversely affected by the programs. Being a large donor of humanitarian and development assistance, we feel that we have a big responsibility. Even though, and I will stress that, it's the individual country's own responsibility to secure women and girls' rights, women's empowerment and opportunity to act as agents of change, we still have a large responsibility as donors of humanitarian and development assistance. And also through the work we do through various multilateral funds and other donor agencies. In Oxfam's report, Governing Climate Funds, What Will Work for Women, it is revealed that when a disaster hits, women have lower financial security than men, poorer access to emergency assistance than men, and limited access to funds that cover disaster losses. This contributes to even further increasing women's vulnerability for disasters and other negative effects of climate change. According to the environmental scientist and contributor to IPCC, Professor Dana Liverman, women are rarely involved when decisions on activities related to climate change are made. Therefore, the money is most frequently directed towards men. This is unacceptable, and we need to rectify it. Governments, donors, UN agencies, and humanitarian organizations can play key roles in communicating the value of women's participation and leadership, and make certain that funding is directed towards women and girls, preferably through women-led initiatives, networks, or organizations. The Green Climate Fund has from the outset mainstreamed gender perspectives as an essential decision-making element for the deployment of its resources. GCF focuses on gender-responsive climate action programs and projects that benefit both women and men. Norway channels a large portion of our climate funding through the Green Climate Fund, and through our seat on its board, we support a strong focus on gender equality. Even though Norway, as a provider of development assistance, peace-building support, and humanitarian assistance, actively seeks to strengthen women's role in society and increase the focus on women as leaders and agents of change, we still have a lot to learn about how best to ensure this. I therefore very much look forward to the panel debate that we will hear this morning. And I will finish with the words of the Lebanese diplomat and philosopher Charles Malik. The fastest way to change society is to mobilize the women of the world. Thank you for your attention, and I will then happily introduce the moderator of this morning session, Hiba Kwasas, and she is Chief of the Humanitarian Action and Crisis Response Office at UN Women. You have the floor, Hiba. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Bratskar, the Ambassador and Permanent Representative of Norway to the United Nations and the international organizations in Geneva. We always know you as a great gender champion, and Norway is a great ally and partner to us in advancing the gender equality and women's empowerment agenda. So good morning, very warm welcome to you all. It's a real pleasure for me to be your moderator today for this session that will really look at addressing the inequality of risk and women's leadership in recovery, in resilience building, and in disaster risk reduction. It's our pleasure to be co-organizing this session with UNDP, with UNICEF, and with UN Environment. And today we will be hearing from very impressive speakers who join us from quite far away to share with us their experience as thought leaders, but also as practitioners who have been at the front line of responses. They are experts, but also practitioners in the area of gender and diversity, in the area in gender responsive disaster risk reduction, in reconstruction and resilience building. Today we will be together hearing from our speakers who will introduce the opportunities and challenges around leveraging women's leadership and participation in resilience building and in resilient recovery. It will be a great opportunity for us here sitting in Geneva to hear a reality check and a field perspective on the differentiated impact of conflicts and disasters on women, girls, men, boys, and persons with disabilities. And where we sit here, often we speak about the fact that vulnerability differs. There's a differentiated impact of crisis. We see it and we hear a lot of statistics around how it differs in the case of mortality, how it differs in loss of livelihoods, how it differs in exposure to gender-based violence, in access to information, to resources, in benefiting from recovery efforts. But not many times do we actually have the people who have been at the front line of the response to come and tell us how does it really play out in reality, and when in many cases the urgent trumps the important and people just go in the usual way of doing business. So this is a great opportunity to hear from our panelists, and I'm personally looking forward to hearing their experiences and ideas. So we will be having this moderated discussion around a set of questions that I will pose to each of our panelists. Then we will be showing a very short video, and then we'll have the opportunity of around 20-25 minutes to have a dialogue between the various esteemed audience we have here and our panelists, and hopefully we will be able to come out with some concrete recommendations that would benefit this conference, but also the global platform moving forward. So with this, I would like to move to our first speaker, to Ms. Dolores Devesi, who will help us unpack the challenges and opportunities around women's participation and leadership along the recovery and resilience building area with a strong reality check. Ms. Dolores is the country director of Oxfam in Solomon Islands. she has been a community development specialist, and she's been one of the experts on gender-responsive disaster risk reduction in the Pacific. She's led Oxfam's emergency response work in Solomon Islands, Fiji, Samoa, and Tonga over the past years. So she really knows what she's talking about. Beyond the theory to the practice. So it's great to have you here. Thank you very much for coming with us. What we would like to hear from you, Dolores, you've been at the front line of response, and you've really witnessed firsthand this differentiated impact that we all talk about here at the global level. But in your experience, what are the key challenges that women face in disaster risk reduction and recovery in Solomon Islands? And how does women's leadership contribute to the recovery and resilience building efforts in practice? And it would be great, since you're here with us and we're hearing from you, to give us some key recommendations to the international community of how can we move towards more inclusive and gender-responsive recovery. Over to you.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to share our experiences. First of all, for Oxfam as an organization, we've heard about the inequality that exists in peace times and how it's exacerbated during disasters. The key work that that's been at the forefront of our work has been, how do we tackle inequality? How do we try and get to the bottom of the underlying issues that result in the inequalities that exist? By doing that, we've had to look at ensuring, I think two or three key things for us is around partnerships and localization, ensuring that the people who we want to benefit from our work are at the forefront and center of our work, including the design of our activities. We've been very fortunate to be implementing a project called the Humanitarian, which is specifically targeting women as frontline responders. Not only women, but also including young people into the village disaster committees, for example. To be able to do that, we ask the women and the young people and people with disabilities at the community level, what do you need help with? Where are the underlying issues? And the key thing that came up from those discussions was, we need to get the men to allow us the space to be able to lead, to be able to sit around the table, to be part of the decision-making of what happens in our communities and in our villages, pre- and post-disaster. So we went about creating a project where it was designed, led by the women. We had also had to, I guess, challenge the existing structures at the provincial government level to also ensure that women and young people and people with disabilities are considered and at the forefront of their work as well. So we've had to challenge and break down a few of the barriers, not only at the village level, but also within the government structures at the provincial level. It is not an easy space, I must admit. Even though the Solomon Islands is a small country and the Pacific in general are small nations, it is also quite complex. In the Solomon Islands, for example, the women in leadership and the status of women is very low. We have 2 women in parliament out of 50 members of parliament, and that's only very recent. We had no female MP in the past. So if you can just imagine, even at the village level, through a patrilineal system, women are not decision makers. They're never considered to be part of the decision making. Our interventions has provided some quick wins. We discovered when we had some bad weather in January this year, the space was provided for women to be first responders. Women were able to conduct initial damage assessments They were able to convince the provincial government in terms of what their support needs are, and therefore provided a much more comprehensive and inclusive response. We also discovered that because of the fast and effective way that women have gone about in responding to a disaster, the recovery efforts were also a lot easier. We were able to compare the results from communities that we had not spent a lot of time with and communities that we've had a lot of interventions. And definitely the communities where we have supported were a lot more organized, a lot more prepared, and were able to include everybody in their response. We come back to tackling inequality again. We also had to look at as I mentioned, the government level. How do we do that? Generally, as I said, I think the need for political leadership sector-wide, multi-sectoral, multi-stakeholder leadership is quite key. The commitment and the will to ensure there is inclusive programming. Again, we also hit a lot of barriers along the way because even in the humanitarian space or the disaster risk reduction space, it's also headed by men. The National Disaster Council, for example, is all men. There are no women on the table. We've also tried to influence that space by co-chairing the National Protection Committee in the country, where we've been able to influence a female head to be able to sit on the table in terms of the decision making at the council level. We've been able to also support the establishment of provincial protection committees headed by women at the provincial level. So again, it's looking at challenging the barriers, looking at challenging the existing structures that are already in place. The other key thing was the women said, for us to be able to not only provide, after we provide the data, but to be able to cope and recover quickly, the thing that we need the most is money. So we've had to also look into, I guess, financial inclusion. How do we then ensure that women have money or have access to money and resources during disasters and after disasters? We've been able to support that through the establishment of savings clubs, which is also very new. I'm pretty sure savings clubs has been around for a long time. But for us in the Solomons, it's very new. There are no banking services in the remote locations. And so there were also a lot of challenges in terms of how we set that up. We are now moving into cash transfer programming. So we are conducting a feasibility study to look at how we can roll that out to ensure that women are able to lead and are able to support their families much better in terms of their recovery efforts. Again, it is not an easy space for us, like I said. Tackling inequality, it's not a standalone, the humanitarian project is not a standalone project. It runs alongside our project on eliminating violence against women, which is also with sharing the same messages around how do we tackle them, how do we include men, how do we include young people, and how do we include people with disabilities. And I think I'll leave it at that for now. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Dolores, and thank you for unpacking some of the structural challenges that precedes a current crisis situation, which really puts women at a disadvantage from the onset, but also for highlighting some of the opportunities that exist when women have to play a different role beyond the traditional role, out of necessity or duty, and how crisis in many cases disrupts the traditional role. So there are emerging opportunities from there that we could really have more of a transformative approach. And I very much appreciated also how you've highlighted that with the political will, the right investment, but the targeted intervention, we could really seize these opportunities and advance women's status and have that transformative approach. So I thank you very much for that. And with that, I would like to move to our next speaker. Our next speaker is Ms. Farina Fatboy. She's a facilitator for UNICEF's Adolescent Kit activity. She successfully supported adolescents to become positive agents in their villages. She also supported the emergency response in tsunami and earthquake affected the area of Palu, Center Sulawesi. She conducted psychosocial support activities for children and adolescents in disaster affected area. So she has been very active in the various areas of work that we've been discussing. So Farina, Indonesia has been hit by recurrent disasters, including the earthquake and tsunami in last September, which have resulted in over 2,000 deaths and over 83,000 people displaced. As a young leader, how did these disasters affect your community from your perspective as a young leader and someone who has been able to witness firsthand the impact of this disaster? Yeah. My second question is, what role did youth play in disaster prevention and response? And if you can share with us some of the stories that you've witnessed firsthand that can also inform the international community as a set of recommendations. So while my questions get translated, I'll just communicate to our audience here that we will be doing subsequent translations. So if you just bear with us, we'll try to keep the interventions quite short so you're able to follow, but please bear with us. We're going to do that twice. And apologies for not having announced that, but there is French-English translation available. If anyone feels the need to have the translation to French, you're more than welcome to access some of the headsets which are on the side. Farina, the floor is yours.
Halo semuanya.
Hi everyone.
Mohon maaf karena saya akan mempresentasikan dalam bahasa Indonesia.
My apologies in advance for presenting in Indonesian.
Perkenalkan, nama saya Farina Fatboy. Saya berasal dari Nusa Tenggara Timur, salah satu provinsi yang ada di Indonesia, dan saya adalah youth fasilitator remaja untuk program Lingkar Remaja.
Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Farina Fatboy. I am youth facilitator of adolescent circle activities in Indonesia. I live in the Oud Salah village in East Nusa Tenggara province, in one of the many islands in Indonesia.
Saya tinggal di desa Oud Salah, salah satu desa yang ada di salah satu pulau yang ada di Indonesia. Dan saat ini saya akan bercerita tentang pengalaman saya mengenai partisipasi remaja untuk pengurangan risiko bencana dan mengapa partisipasi remaja itu penting, terutama remaja perempuan.
Today I would like to share the experience on adolescent participation on DRR process and emergency response, and why I think adolescents, especially girls' participation is important.
Next. Ya, seperti yang saya ceritakan di awal, di desa kami mengalami banyak kebencanaan, salah satunya seperti tanah longsor, kebakaran hutan, dan juga kekeringan.
Our village often face recurrent disasters such as droughts, forest fires, and landslides.
Ya. Dan di desa kami masih belum partisipasi remaja masih belum terlihat untuk pengurangan risiko bencana ini.
Adolescent participation were not really felt in our village.
Ya, dan sehingga di desa kami, saya bersama-sama dengan remaja yang ada di desa saya, kami melakukan kegiatan mingguan yang kami sebut dengan Lingkar Remaja.
So in my village, we conducted the weekly activities with my adolescent peers that we called adolescent circles.
Itu adalah kegiatan yang disupport oleh UNICEF bersama dengan Child Fund dan juga mitra lokal yang ada di desa kami.
The program was the support from UNICEF, Child Fund, and local community organizations.
Ya, Jadi dalam kegiatan itu kami remaja-remaja kami berdiskusi mengidentifikasi masalah-masalah yang ada di lingkungan kami yang berkaitan dengan kebencanaan, termasuk kami juga memetakan wilayah-wilayah yang beresiko terhadap kami sebagai remaja.
In these activities, we map out our environment and identify the hazard risk vulnerabilities in our village.
Ya, dan selain itu kami juga mewawancarai remaja-remaja yang lain yang ada di desa kami untuk menanyakan kira-kira masalah yang kami hadapi itu sama dengan yang mereka rasakan.
In addition, we also conduct interviews with our adolescent peers in our village to ensure that we are to ask whether we face the same problem.
Ya, next. Ya. Dan di dalam lingkaran remaja itu kami menemukan masalah yang ada di desa kami, yaitu masalah kekeringan.
Through these activities, we identified that the drought during the dry season is one of the main issue in our community.
Ya, sebelum berkegiatan lingkar remaja, kekeringan ini menjadi masalah yang menurut kami itu adalah sesuatu yang wajar karena setiap tahunnya terjadi dan sudah terbiasa dalam kehidupan sehari-hari.
Before, we didn't realize that the drought was an issue because it is happening throughout the season and we thought it as a usual part of our daily life.
Ya. Namun dalam kegiatan lingkar remaja setelah kami mengidentifikasi, ternyata kami menemukan bahwa masalah kekeringan ini membawa dampak yang cukup besar bagi kami remaja dan juga perempuan.
But throughout our discussion in our adolescent circle activities, we found out that the drought is actually causing impact to us, especially to the life of adolescent and women.
Ya, karena masalah kekeringan ini, kami harus mengakses air bersih pada sumber mata air yang jaraknya cukup jauh dari rumah kami. Dan aktivitas itu biasanya dilakukan hanya oleh remaja dan juga perempuan.
During the dry season, we have to collect water in the water spring that was located far away from our house, and it was the job of female and adolescent in our village to collect water.
Ya, sehingga berdampak pada kehidupan aktivitas kami sebagai remaja, kami harus melakukan aktivitas mengambil air sebelum dan sepulang sekolah, sehingga itu berdampak pada keterlambatan kami ke sekolah dan juga kami tidak memiliki banyak waktu luang.
Having to walk long distance to collect water before and after school, the adolescents are being late for schools and has no spare time to do their course.
Ya.
Next.
Ya. Sehingga dalam aktivitas lingkar remaja ini kami sama-sama berdiskusi antar remaja dan kami mengidentifikasi kira-kira solusi apa yang bisa kami hasilkan untuk mengatasi masalah kekeringan yang ada di desa kami.
So we conducted research and come up with a solution to address the drought problem in our village.
Ya, dan dari diskusi itu kami menemukan satu solusi, yaitu kami membuat sumur bor dan juga pompa yang bisa mengalirkan air di musim kemarau.
So we come up with a solution by installing a drilled well with a motor pump, which help to provide water even during the dry season.
Ya. Dan solusi itu kami buat dalam prototype dan kami ceritakan apa yang sudah kami hasilkan dari solusi kami kepada orang tua, supaya orang tua kami mengadvokasi itu kepada pemimpin desa dan itu bisa dianggarkan dan juga dibuatkan.
So we made a prototype of our solution and we told our parents of our solution to be further advocated to the village planning process.
Ya. Dan dari usulan itu di desa kami sekarang sudah memiliki 5 sumur bor karena usulan itu diterima dan dijawab.
So our strategy worked, and now the village council agreed to install the drilled wells in our village using the village funding. Now we currently have 5 drilled well in our village.
Next. Ya. Dampaknya kegiatan lingkar remaja ini tidak hanya kepada kami sebagai remaja, tapi juga kepada masyarakat yang ada di desa kami.
From these activities, we saw impact not only for adolescents, but also for the community.
Ya. Di mana kemampuan dan keterampilan dari remaja-remaja itu semakin meningkat dan mereka semakin berpikir kritis dan juga peduli pada lingkungannya, dan mereka juga mau terlibat dalam kegiatan-kegiatan pengurangan risiko bencana.
We saw adolescents increase skill and competency as they learn to think critically and become aware of their environments. Now they are more confident to be involved in community participation.
Dan remaja juga semakin mendapat peran positif di masyarakat.
So now currently the adolescents are being regarded as positive member of the society.
Dan dari kegiatan ini juga proses pengurangan risiko bencana itu menjadi inklusi karena melibatkan tidak hanya melibatkan orang dewasa, tapi kami sebagai remaja juga dilibatkan dalam proses pengurangan risiko bencana ini.
We accomplish a DRR process that includes all stakeholders, that includes adolescents and females.
Selain itu, di desa kami juga kepala desanya mulai melibatkan anak-anak remaja dalam proses perencanaan pembangunan di desa.
So now the head of the village is now including adolescents in every village planning.
Dan dari masalah kekeringan yang sudah teratasi itu juga membawa dampak pada perubahan perilaku hidup bersih dan sehat dalam masyarakat karena akses air yang sudah sangat mudah.
So now it improved the hygiene behavior in our village by the easier access of clean water.
Next. Dan sekarang saya akan bercerita tentang pengalaman saya. Berdasarkan pengalaman saya di Kupang, saya juga turut mendukung kegiatan tanggap darurat di Palu dengan membantu fasilitator remaja di Palu untuk menjalankan kegiatan yang sama, yaitu kegiatan lingkar remaja.
Based on my experience in Kupang, I also supported the emergency response activity in Palu by providing support to youth facilitators in Palu to conduct the adolescent circle activities.
Seperti yang kita ketahui bahwa di akhir 2018 kemarin itu terjadi bencana gempa bumi, tsunami dan juga likuifaksi di Palu yang memberikan cukup banyak korban.
As you may all aware, in September 2018, huge earthquake, tsunami and liquefaction happened in Palu, which resulted in many victims.
Dan kegiatan lingkar remaja ini juga sangat mendukung karena pada saat itu di Palu dukungan untuk remaja-remaja itu masih sangat kurang karena fokusnya mereka itu pada anak dan juga orang dewasa.
The adolescent circle activities actually help because at the time during initial response phase, the support for the support were more focused on the younger children and adults, and there was not enough support for adolescents.
Next. Dalam kegiatan lingkar remaja yang ada di Palu, itu remaja-remaja yang ada di posko pengungsian, mereka mengidentifikasi ancaman dan juga tantangan berdasarkan pengalaman mereka.
Through the adolescent circle activities in Palu, adolescents identified issues and challenges they face in emergency camps and temporary shelters. Next.
Di dalam kegiatan itu mereka banyak sekali memberikan solusi-solusi yang berkaitan dengan masalah yang mereka alami di Palu. Itu salah satunya pengurangan sampah dengan pembuatan pengolahan sampah dan juga penghijauan kembali tempat pengungsian serta beberapa perempuan di antara peserta itu mereka juga mengidentifikasi masalah perkawinan usia anak.
So the adolescent managed to develop a solution from the issues such as waste management and deforestation in the emergency camps.
Karena mereka melihat bahwa ternyata pada situasi kebencanaan pun masih ada permasalahan berkaitan dengan pernikahan usia anak karena orang tua merasa bahwa mereka perlu menikahkan anak gadis mereka karena mereka sudah tidak tahu lagi apa yang harus mereka lakukan untuk mengatasi masalah yang mereka sedang alami.
So some adolescent girls also identify the issue of child marriage as one of the issues faced in the emergency camps because during the uncertainty of emergency, the parents rather married off their young daughters in the emergency situation.
Dan solusi-solusi yang mereka hasilkan itu UNICEF bersama dengan mitra lokalnya mendukung mereka dengan melakukan kompetisi inovasi. Jadi solusi terbaik yang mereka hasilkan akan didukung, dianggarkan supaya solusi itu bisa dijalankan.
So UNICEF and local partners recently held an innovation competition in Palu to encourage the development of the solution idea and awarded the best solution ideas by providing small seed funding for their implementation.
Next. Dari pengalaman saya di Palu dan juga di Kupang, kenapa partisipasi remaja itu, terutama remaja perempuan itu sangat penting untuk pengurangan risiko bencana, karena kita tahu bahwa dalam situasi bencana remaja mungkin mengalami tantangan tersendiri yang solusinya mereka sendiri yang bisa menghasilkannya.
So to conclude from my experience in Kupang and Palu, adolescents might face a specific challenge that might not be noticed by adults. But in the case of my village, adult males did not notice the urgency of issues because they did not need to walk far away to collect water.
Dan juga remaja memiliki ide-ide yang sangat luar biasa untuk membawa perubahan. Seperti contohnya yang ada di desa saya, laki-laki belum tentu merasakan bahwa kekeringan itu berdampak pada mereka. Tapi ternyata pada perempuan itu sangat membawa dampak yang besar bagi kehidupan mereka.
So adolescent has the ability and amazing idea to create change, like also what in the case of my village.
Dan menurut saya yang paling penting adalah kita perlu memberikan ruang yang nyaman dan aman bagi remaja, terlebih khusus remaja perempuan, untuk menyuarakan ide-ide mereka, bekerja sama dengan orang dewasa untuk membawa perubahan.
I think it is important to have a safe space for adolescents, especially girls, to develop their potential to speak up their ideas and collaborate with the adults in advocating change in their community.
Sekian dari saya, terima kasih.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Farina, for sharing also with us your infectious energy and positivity. I think it's very inspiring to hear of concrete stories of how the power of young energy is actually being part of finding a solution and pushing and changing things in the right direction. So thank you very much for sharing this positive stories with us, but also to show what are the key ingredients to make that happen in terms of creating the safe spaces, in terms of raising the awareness and opening avenues of participation and influence, and how that can then make it more of a systematic modality of engagement, because also the value added is clear and evident to the decision makers. So thank you very much for that. And with that, I would like to move to our next speaker. Our next speaker is Ms. Midori Hirano, who's joining us from Japan. She has been the chairperson of Disabled Peoples International, Japan, since 2013. Just after the Kumamoto earthquake of 2016, she was engaged in establishing and managing Kumamoto Support Center for Refugees with Disabilities, and contributed to the development of knowledge base and capacity building of government officials and NGOs on disabilities and disaster risk reduction. So we are very lucky to have her here to share with us from her concrete experience as an expert and practitioner from this field. Ms. Hirano, from the case of Kumamoto earthquake, can you shed a light on the vulnerabilities and challenges persons with disabilities face in disasters? But also, we often hear about the double exclusion when we talk about intersectionality and how gender and disability and other considerations can leave certain segments of the population at a higher risk. How did that play out in the case of Japan? And how can we, as international community and practitioners in this field, harness the contributions of persons with disabilities for more effective and efficient recovery and resilience building initiatives? So as you can see, I have a lot of questions for you, and we very much look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hiba, as mother facilitator, and other distinguished speakers as well. I'm very pleased to be here to share the information among you. So I will speak about the Kumamoto earthquake. First of all, I have to mention about the government system in Kumamoto. The local and national committees for disaster risk reduction should include people with disability as members. Inevitably, it should include women with disabilities and parents who have children with disabilities, and so on. As a matter of fact, in Kumamoto Prefecture, committee members were dominated by men without disabilities who were assumed as specialists of specific fields in terms of disaster. However, Kumamoto earthquake showed that local and national plans for disaster evacuation could not work well in terms of inclusive disaster risk reduction. In other words, perspectives of women and people with disabilities need to be incorporated into these plans for them to fully accommodate their needs. Consequently, to reduce disaster risk, persons with disabilities, aged people, women, foreign people, various gender communities must be involved in the planning and training of evacuations and so on in normal time. Okay. Just a moment. Okay. For example, when victims of Kumamoto earthquake evacuated to evacuation shelters, many shelters did not give tailored treatment to people with disabilities who had different needs, saying that everybody is a victim and we cannot give special treatment to people with disabilities. People with different disabilities were treated as the same group, and the needs of women with disabilities were especially ignored. Some people were even forced to go back to their half-destroyed homes. I can say that the challenges are the awareness and understanding toward people with disabilities and gender-sensitive needs are still very low. There were support given to the mothers with children. However, moving forward, we also need to recognize that the mothers who care for children with disabilities and mothers who themselves have disabilities also have specific needs that need to be addressed. That's why I say that the committee in a normal time should include people with disability and women with disabilities and other minority groups. As she said, as she told about the Kumamoto Center for People with Disability Victims of Disasters, we say Kumamoto SOS Center. When developing plans for disaster risk management at the neighborhood level, we need to include people with disabilities in the planning committee, as I told. Among those members with disabilities, some of them need to be women. What we understand from Kumamoto earthquake is that the needs of people with disabilities vary based on their disabilities, and governments alone cannot respond to all of these needs. So we, leaders of disaster victims, established the Kumamoto Center for People with Disabilities Victims of Disasters. We say Kumamoto SOS Center, which was able to respond to various needs of people with disabilities, thanks to the donation and volunteers that were sent from all over the country. However, challenges remained that initiatives by this center was not understood fully by the local government, which did not allow for sharing of necessary information by the government to the center and exchange of information between the two. Moving forward, more efficient cooperation is necessary between the private sector and the public sector, and even among the private sector, to support and achieve a more inclusive recovery of people with disabilities, including women with disabilities. Okay, just a moment. Just a moment. Okay. Okay. In my position as a woman with disabilities, we have been working hard to appeal our existence to the Committee on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women, CEDAW, because we had not been assumed as women for a long time, but just as persons with disabilities, even by women without disabilities. Thanks to the strong recommendation by the committee in 2016, it was ordered that the Japanese government must have comprehensive perception, understanding, and surveys on women with disabilities to understand better their situation and conditions. As a matter of fact, we will appeal at the Committee on Convention of Persons with Disabilities, taking the opportunity of the constructive dialogue on the country report by Japanese government, which will be scheduled in the spring of 2020. And now we are working hard to make alternative report of NGOs include multiplex discrimination issues on women with disabilities. We strongly believe this process will contribute to build awareness of women with disabilities. Multiplex discrimination issues among national and local governments, and they will, we hope, make effective disaster risk reduction management system, working together with women with disabilities and other gender groups. And lastly, now we are with DPI Japan and AAR Japan, Associate of Aid and Relief Japan, started to build collaboration to make a textbook on how to support people with disability types of support people with different types of disabilities, and how to establish disability inclusive communities pre, during, and post-disaster. Definitely, we must work hard to make this textbook gender-inclusive one. This textbook is expected to contribute inclusive disaster risk reduction management system locally and nationally in Japan. However, the textbook will be in Japanese language and based on Japanese disasters occurred in Japan. However, it could be translated and arranged within the countries, in other countries, and we hope this process will be helped by the foundation or other helping groups. Yes, okay. Okay. Yeah, that's all. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for really confirming again, as much as we would like to be wrong on this issue of double exclusion, but thank you for confirming again that this is a problem that is still widely spread in developed countries as much as in developing countries. So it is a global challenge that we need to find solution to address, but also for unpacking the differing needs of people with disabilities, because in many cases we see it when we're talking about gender issues in terms of lumping all the issues of women, women's issues, and really not in many cases unpacking what are these different needs and what are the different levels of exposure to risk and what are the different dimensions. But also thank you for highlighting the need of a whole of society approach in responding and the role of public and private sector partnership to respond for a more inclusive recovery. So now before we open up the floor, we would like to share just a short video that the co-organizer have, UNICEF and UN Women would like to share with you. And then following that 3 minutes video, we will be opening up the floor for reflections. The volume. Yeah.
During 2018, a total of 281 disasters, including earthquakes, mudslides, floods, and storms, affected 61.7 million women, men, girls, and boys. Typically, fatalities resulting from disasters are highest among women and children. Moreover, as we have seen in Malawi, Mozambique, and Zimbabwe in 2019, climate change is making this unacceptable situation worse. 61% of fatalities in Myanmar after Cyclone Nargis in 2008, 70% of fatalities of the tsunami in Tonga and Samoa in 2009, 55% of fatalities in the Nepal earthquake in 2015 were women. 17,000 children died during the Kashmir earthquake in Pakistan in 2005, during which more than 7,500 schools were destroyed. Disasters also force poor households to make choices that have detrimental long-term effects, such as withdrawing a child from school or cutting expenditure on healthcare. Children that survive disasters are often at great physical and psychological peril and at risk of being trafficked, abused, exploited, and forced into labor. Pre-existing gender and age inequalities contribute to the limited resources and exclusion from decision-making processes of women, youth, and children, which in turn increases their vulnerability. When disasters strike, women's livelihoods tend to be most affected, and gender and age inequalities make it more difficult for women, youth, and children to recover. In sub-Saharan Africa, women make up some 70% of agricultural employees. Most of them are informally employed. These women will not be compensated for disaster losses and will struggle for their own and their children's survival. UN Women and UNICEF work with policymakers, local authorities, humanitarian organizations, and other stakeholders to empower women and young people as leaders, supporting their critical roles in prevention, preparedness, response, and recovery. To more effectively identify and address the risks and distinct challenges women and children face before, during, and after disasters, UNICEF and UN Women call for increased investment in disaster resilience that is sensitive to gender and age, the collection of sex, age, and disability disaggregated data, and the recognition of the roles of women, youth, and children in building a safer and climate-resilient future for this generation and the next.
Great. With this, we would like to open the floor for some reflections from the floor. I think the video has left us with three key recommendations or ingredients for a more effective recovery and resilience building. They've highlighted the increased investment and resilience in terms of more sensitive and gender approaches. They've highlighted the need for collection of sex and age disaggregated data, and thirdly, the recognition of the role and contribution of women, youth, children, and persons with disabilities. So with that, we would like to open the floor, and it would be great to hear some reflections around your experiences in increasing investments in resilience and how we can promote more inclusive approaches and collection of sex and age disaggregated data. So we have Celia from UN Environment who will start, and then we have a few. Yes, so we'll start with Celia, and then we will come to you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Hiba, and thank you to all the wonderful speakers today for sharing their inspiring experiences. My name is Celia Halley. I work for UN Environment, and I manage a joint program of UN Environment, UN Women, UNDP, and the UN Peacebuilding Support Office that focuses on the nexus of gender, natural resources, climate, and peace. And I just wanted to complement the discussion today by highlighting the importance of focusing on women's leadership for recovery in situations of conflict and security as well. And in particular when disasters, for example, climate-related disasters, intersect with conflict. UN Security Council Resolution 1325, which many of us know well on women, peace, and security, has is supposed to have given us 20 years of programming on these issues, but as we all know, that agenda has been implemented very unevenly. There's been great progress on some aspects, while others, and indeed much of what relates to post-conflict recovery, economic or otherwise, has largely fallen by the wayside in these last 20 years. There's still serious underinvestment in programming that capitalizes on women's leadership in recovery and peace building, and this gap continues to undermine women's ability to cope with situations in which they are increasingly on the front lines of disaster, conflict, or both in the case of climate-related insecurity. So in Sudan, for example, where we've just completed a pilot project under our joint program, the livelihood impacts related to climate change, the impacts of rainwater variability, soil degradation, etc., are contributing to two clear problems. One is the very visible increase in localized conflict between resource user groups. There have been very significant increases in violence and death over the last few months alone, and those are closely correlated with seasons where there is little rainfall and where different resource user groups have to share an increasingly degraded environment. The second, and I think this is largely understudied, at least in the experience that we have, is that these impacts are also changing the social makeup of the community in such a way that really the communities are increasingly female. Both sedentary communities are losing men to economic migration, which is creating insecurity elsewhere in the country, and pastoral communities are splitting and leaving women and children behind in communities as the men continue the migration. So we have very largely female communities, which means that, of course, women are left not only to support their families and communities economically and adapt to a degraded environment, but also they're left on the front lines of conflict between different user groups. And this is actually a significant opportunity for programming on women's empowerment, both economic and political, that strengthens their contributions and indeed their leadership in recovery and peace building. But to be effective here, we need to do much better to overcome what continues to be very siloed approaches in these areas. More integration is needed between organizations, between different mandates, more joint programming, etc., such as we've tried to do, between investments, and I really appeal to the donor community here because donors continue to deliver investment in very siloed ways. Ministries of Environment provide investments for environmental programming, ministries of Ministry of Foreign Affairs provided specific investments in conflict and peace building, but rarely you see these integrated in donors' investments. And of course, we need more integration between various global agendas, between programming on climate change and conflict and peace building, but also between disaster risk reduction and conflict prevention. So I just thank you for the opportunity to reflect with you here, and I look forward to hearing some other comments. Thanks.
Great. Thank you very much, Celia. So we'll move a bit to the front here, and then we will go to the back. That lady in red.
Hello, I'm Gloria. I'm working with Cordate, but I am from Uganda. I just want to supplement from the presentation, and I want to come from the point from the women from the grassroots level. So when we look at women's leadership in recovery and basing from the presentation from Solomon Island, where you have only 2 women in the whole big group of men, it makes me think and think again, because for me it's not even about the numbers, it's about the quality. Because in my own country, Uganda, we have a fair amount of women representing us in leadership, but most of them are quiet. Most of them are just there to just make the numbers look good, but it's not about us flaunting women to the positions of leadership, but how are they vocal about matters that concern them in regards to their own empowerment processes. So this is something that we can also look into, disaster risk management. Are we giving voice to the women we are sending out there, or we're just putting the numbers and face to the image of equality, but then we're not looking at the quality of equality we are fronting forward. So this is something like food for thought for all of us. Let us encourage women. If you're looking at beating social norms that keep women down, and then we we managed to get a few of, young ladies like this one, let's put voice to them. Let's make them vocal, that when they're out there in positions of leadership, they are talking, they're addressing, things that concern them or they relate to. And then that way maybe we can move a little bit more forward practically. Thank you.
Thank you. Excellent presentations. I'm Raj Kumar. I work for the provincial government of Karnataka in India. I would like to submit to this august gathering that particularly the people with double exclusion, as Hiba has used the right word, how do we make them visible? And that too by a legislative process. Recently in Kodagu, which is a district in Karnataka, it was affected by the flood, and the government officer leading the campaign was a woman officer. And luckily we saw the UNICEF support in looking at the psychological and social aspects of the recovery. So my submission to this panel would be that can we catalog the good practices where we make these people with double exclusion visible first.
Merci beaucoup. Je suis le directeur général de la protection civile du Niger. Je vais parler en français. Je ne sais pas s'il y a la traduction. Otherwise, I can try to speak in English. It's okay? Ok, donc je vais parler en français parce que c'est dans la langue où je suis le plus à l'aise. Donc, il est reconnu effectivement que dans les pays, notamment en Afrique, que la femme a moins accès à l'éducation, qu'elle a moins accès aux postes de responsabilité, que ce soit de l'administration, que ce soit au niveau des parlements et autres. Mais elle a aussi moins accès à la terre, à la propriété, à un certain nombre de choses qui devraient lui permettre de participer aux activités de la communauté. Mais paradoxalement, on constate aussi qu'en situation de catastrophe, c'est la femme qui est à même de bien prendre en charge les enfants. Je dirais même si je suis un homme, je suis jaloux de cela, la femme, elle est à même de mieux prendre en charge les femmes dans leurs problématiques spécifiques. Elle est à même de mieux prendre en charge les personnes en situation de handicap. Alors finalement, je dirais qu'il y a un double en fait handicap, puisque de par ce que je viens de citer, et le problème ne fait que s'aggraver. Pourtant, nous sommes tous d'accord que la gente féminine, lorsqu'elle s'engage de quelque chose, on a beaucoup plus de résultats. Que ce soit à travers l'éducation des enfants, que ce soit à travers ses engagements dans tout ce qui rend la communauté moins vulnérable, la participation de la communauté au relèvement et tout ça. Alors, comment allons-nous faire pour que ces problèmes puissent être surmontés globalement? C'est des activités spécifiques qu'il faut dédier à la gente féminine, notamment en matière de formation, ou bien c'est le système encore de quotas qui ne dit pas son nom, qui, lorsque en fait on va sur le terrain, ces quotas ne sont jamais respectés. Et je vais dire les quotas au niveau des portefeuilles ministériels, au niveau de l'Assemblée et au niveau des différentes instances de décision. On aime dire discrimination positive, mais moi jusqu'à présent, je ne suis pas convaincu qu'on a trouvé la solution à ces problèmes. Donc voici les préoccupations que moi je soulève. Si on peut m'apporter des éclaircissements ou bien d'autres idées qui pourraient contribuer à prendre en compte ces problèmes. Merci.
Merci, monsieur. Can you please just pass it to the lady here and then we'll come back to you, sir. Just bear with us. Right here.
Thank you, and thank you to the panelists for the great presentations. Christiana George. gender advisor to African Risk Capacity. The African Risk Capacity is a specialized agency of the African Union, and we work with the African members, the member states of the African Union to prepare and plan with them and build their capacity for better response to disasters. And in this process, we have been working from a general perspective, but recently we decided to really focus on mainstreaming gender. So we are at the final stage of developing our gender strategy. But in the course of work with the member states, we use financial mechanisms, and one of such mechanisms is the sovereign insurance. And the major challenge we have with the sovereign insurance is that we're dealing with government at a high level, and these disasters occur at the local level. And so depending on how much gender is integrated within the country, it's going to be difficult to really go down to the local communities to be able to integrate gender. And so we're looking at various other options that we could use to really get the women to be involved, because we know these issues are very concrete all over Africa. And there's a program which has been going on, but we see it also as an entry point to be able to integrate gender more effectively, and it's a replica program. The replica program simply replicates what the government is doing. So it's whatever insurance the government takes in DRR, through our insurance company. The humanitarian actors come together, people working within the country, come together and take a similar insurance policy, so that whatever activities are carried out, are decided upon, at least with the humanitarian actors, we know that there's a focus on gender. So we'll be talking more about this replica project at the Ignite stage, most likely on Friday. But the challenge we have now is also to try to get the humanitarian actors within the countries to come together and really commit to replicating this program. So in the next couple of days, I'll be exchanging with a lot of them, and we hope that we'll be able to get some commitments at the country levels from Oxfam is there, and we're also working with WFP and all that to be able to make this program work for women. Thank you.
Arid Zaman from the Commonwealth Business Women's Network. I have other colleagues of mine in other rooms right now here. I just want to say that I think in relation to the points that were made from the session, the key messages, certainly concur with them around the impact and the involvement of women in terms of disasters. That needs to be certainly fully addressed. But I think there are three key areas we need to consider. If we look at entrepreneurship capacity building for women, there is a big gap, and that gap is on DRR. I don't think when we talk about entrepreneurship capacity building for women, there's a whole session this afternoon on the private sector. We need to make the connect. And so one of the outcomes for us from this session is in our discussions in our work with UNCTAD on working with them on our entrepreneurship capacity building program, we will now build in a DRR element so women entrepreneurs can consider that. But I think there's another area when we talk about technology and blockchain, we also need to recognize that there are opportunities for women in that area as well. So how are we providing space for women to be part of that conversation? And I think the other area is in relation to parliamentarians. I've just come from a very inspiring session where we heard about the importance of women parliamentarians and the perspective they bring. A few weeks ago, Pakistan's climate change minister, who's a woman, talked about that. So my question is simply, we need to join the dots on this, not just seeing women as victims in terms of disaster risk reduction, but as being active agents of change, driving forward innovative solutions, being entrepreneurs, and also finding parliamentarians who can drive that forward, working with women. And I'd just be interested in the panel's responses to my comments. Thank you very much.
Back to the front, and here you sit. Yeah? Next to Anthony.
Many thanks. This is Heidi Perot from UNICEF. My question was directed to Mrs. Irano. So you mentioned the need to strengthen the link between private sector and public sector in building a more inclusive disaster risk reduction. So could you give us maybe 2 or 3 very concrete examples of what are the priority actions that you think the business sector should take for a more inclusive DR, like very concrete priorities that you think are the most important to tackle? And maybe also the same to Farina, if she has any experience on working with the private sector, and what can the private sector do, very concrete priorities on supporting adolescents' leadership in DR. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Would you just kindly forward it 1 row in front of you to the lady right there? Yeah, there you go, please.
Merci beaucoup. Je vais aussi parler français parce que je ne comprends pas anglais. Je vais d'abord commencer par remercier les panélistes pour leur brillant exposé. Et moi, mon nom, c'est Fatima Touré. Je viens du Mali, et précisément du nord du Mali. Et dans ce nord du Mali, on ne connaît presque pas de catastrophes naturelles. Ce qu'on connaît, c'est les conflits. C'est les conflits qui sont dus aux hommes. Et dans cette partie du continent, qui est le nord du Mali, il y a des conflits, effectivement, qui sont entretenus par des djihadistes et des indépendantistes. Ça veut dire quoi? Ça veut dire que les populations sont constamment en déplacement ou réfugiés dans nos pays voisins. Et même dans ces camps de réfugiés et des camps de déplacés, c'est connu que c'est les femmes qui entretiennent les enfants, c'est les femmes qui entretiennent les hommes, et c'est aussi les femmes qui entretiennent la famille qui est restée sur place, grâce à leurs activités génératives de revenus qu'elles mènent dans ces camps de réfugiés et de déplacés. Maintenant, ce qui est malheureux, c'est qu'effectivement, ces déplacés et réfugiés ne sont pas pris en compte dans le processus de la négociation pour aboutir à des accords de paix et dans le processus de la reconstruction. C'est réellement malheureux. Ça, c'est ma première intervention. Et je vais vous interpeller en vous disant qu'il faut réellement y prendre compte. On ne les considère pas et dans la négociation, dans les accords et dans la reconstruction. Elles sont carrément à la marche, complètement. La deuxième chose que je n'ai jamais pu comprendre, c'est qu'il n'y a pas de colloque, il n'y a pas de forum, il n'y a pas de conférence, où on n'a pas des espaces comme ça qui rappellent le rôle important que la femme joue dans les questions de post-conflit ou de post-catastrophe, dans la reconstruction pour rétablir la paix, pour consolider, pour la cohésion, pour tout, pour même le renforcement de la résilience. Mais le constat, c'est que j'ai comme l'impression que le discours ne change pas. Le discours ne change pas. Nous, on a envie de venir ici et qu'on nous dise les choses avancent. Les politiques avancent. Les politiques sont conscients de plus en plus qu'elle a un rôle important et il faut lui donner sa place dans tout le processus politique, économique, social et tout ce qui s'ensuit. Mais ça ne change pas. Les hommes qui sont au devant des institutions ne changent pas. Dans le système des Nations Unies, la seule organisation des Nations Unies qui est connue, qui travaille à l'émergence des femmes, c'est ONU Femmes. Mais l'ONU Femmes, c'est l'organisation, c'est-à-dire la plus, qui est maltraitée en termes de mobilisation de ressources. Nous sommes des organisations locales, parce que je travaille pour le compte d'une organisation locale dans cette région de Gao au nord du Mali. Nous recevons les subsides de ONU-Femmes, mais Dieu seul c'est le problème que nous avons à gérer ces subsides-là, parce que ce n'est pas des programmes même de longue durée, même pas de moyenne durée. C'est des petites actions ponctuelles qu'on mène qui font du saupoudrage. Ça veut dire qu'ils n'ont pas de capacité à mobiliser. Ça veut dire que c'est réellement le parent pauvre du système des Nations Unies. Seulement l'ONU-Femmes. Regardons l'ONU-Femmes. Au-delà, en plus du fait que les lois nationales qui sont prises et qui favorisent l'émergence politique de ces femmes ne sont pas respectées. Et même les lois internationales. Prenons seulement le cas de la 1325 qui autorise les femmes à être autour de la négociation, autour de la table de négociation, elles ne sont pas respectées. Et qui veille à ces mises en œuvre? Qui veille? Il n'y a pas de mesures coercitives. Les gens passent tout leur temps à se rencontrer, à prendre des lois et tout. Mais la vérité, c'est que j'ai l'impression, c'est une impression tout à fait personnelle, que même quand les choses changent, elles ne changent pas beaucoup. Donc l'interpellation doit être autour de ça. Il faut que ça change.
Ouais.
Il faut que ça change. Je vous remercie.
Merci beaucoup, madame. Would you still like to make it, but please a short intervention because we are running out of time.
Go to say something. I'd like to ask Verena, where does she get the time to study when she is doing so much of work? It must be a real tough one.
Great.
But I was looking at the 3 words of inequality, women, and recovery. And the major issue is that women's assets that they have are very limited. And that is one of the reasons if women's leadership does emerge, is really, really powerful. But it also means that when men migrate and women are left behind, there are much more women-headed households who have to deal with all these issues. And there are also, if there are no remittances for women, then the situation becomes much more.
Great.
I know you don't have time, so I won't say anything more.
Thank you very much. So I would like to go back to our panelists and just ask them to please stick to 1 minute in their final words or reflections, and we'll start with Farina. If you have any final thoughts you would like to share.
Terima kasih. Untuk yang terakhir, saya mau mengatakan.
Thank you. Lastly, I would like to say that.
Bahwa terima kasih sudah berbagi banyak hal di sini. Saya belajar banyak hal dan akan saya sampaikan ke perempuan-perempuan yang ada di luar sana bahwa kita tidak hanya akan bisa selamanya menjadi korban, tapi kita juga punya sesuatu yang luar biasa untuk disuarakan dan diperlihatkan. Kita hanya perlu ruang yang nyaman dan aman untuk kita.
I would like to say that I've learned a lot from this session and from the comments from the audience and colleagues, and I would like to reshare to my community peers of adolescents in my community that as a woman, not only we can be as a victim, but also we have a lot of opportunities to engage and advocate our change in our community.
Terima kasih.
Thank you.
Please. Okay. Sarah.
Thank you for the question to me, the lady in front of me. I would like to in promoting the disability awareness and gender inclusive awareness in the private sectors and also public sector too. Sometimes we are asked to be a speaker to the members of the groups, sometimes public or sometimes private. And they say, we would like to know the disability issues or something like that. But in that case, I would talk about, I would add the information and share the information about the women with disabilities. Sometimes our members, if male member, don't speak about anything about women with disability. But I ask them, please mention about the women with disability. And sometimes public sector and private sectors have the training course. For example, to prevent the sexual assault or sexual harassment, and please talk about. We will ask not only the harassment but also the issues about the women, and including women with disabilities, and then we will sometimes be a speaker, and the kind of experiences will promote the awareness among them, and in terms of the disaster case, it will, I'm sure, work effectively. And to tell the truth, I am living in a country which is ranked 141 in terms of the gender index or something like that. Yeah. Japan is a developed country, but in terms of the gender awareness or gender sensitiveness, very, very low. That affects the poor evacuation for the people with disability and people, women with disability. So we have to work so hard from now on too. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dolores?
Just very quickly, I think inclusive programming is the way to go. It's the future for us in ensuring that we are reaching the most affected. I think the term mainstreaming is no longer the buzzword. I think it's a thing of the past. And we need to really ensure that there is inclusive programming across all our work. And we also have the right, I guess the obligation and the responsibility to transfer whatever power we have to those who need it the most.
Thank you very, very much for, I think, a very nice sum up of our panel. I think our panelists have earned a round of applause, so I'll just ask that we thank them very much. Thank you. I think you've shared with us your collective wisdom in shedding light on the unequal vulnerability and exposure to risk, looking at intersectionality and the double exclusion, but also that we need to be intentional about understanding these and factoring these in how we invest and how we program along the humanitarian development, recovery, but also peace nexus. One of the takeaways that I feel is a common thread is the unique contributions of different segments of the society, whether women, whether youth, whether women with disabilities or youth with disabilities, and harnessing just the potential of harnessing that energy for more effective resilience and recovery, and the fact that we need to challenge our set way of doing business so we don't overlook these opportunities that are there and the opportunities that open up as a result of shaking the pillars of patriarchy that happen sometimes in the case of crisis, or shaking the set way of doing business where youth come to the forefront of looking at solutions. I think we as international community need to move from commitments to action. We have a lot of commitments at the normative level, and from business as usual to business unusual, which you've really pushed us to think about. And I really appreciated the strong call for also promoting women's leadership and contribution and engagement beyond victimhood, but really to recognize their value added. So thank you very much.